On the Infinite, the Universe and the Worlds, by Giordano Bruno. Prefatory Epistle. To the most illustrious Lord Mitchell de Castelnau, Lord of Mauvissiere, Croncresalt, and Joinville, Knight of the Order of the Most Christian King, Counsellor of his Privy Council, Captain of 50 men-at-arms, and Ambassador of the Most Serene Queen of England. If I, most excellent knight, tended a flock, plowed the land, planted a garden, or sewed a garment, no one would hear me. Very few would observe me. Rare would be those who censured me, and I could easily please everyone. However, because I am a scholar of nature, always attentive to what nourishes the soul, aspiring to the cultivation of the spirit, and dedicating myself to intellectual activity, he who sees himself observed comes to threaten me. He who feels targeted assaults me. He who is struck attacks me. And he who finds himself uncovered wishes to devour me. It is not just a few or only one who proceeds in this manner. There are many. They are almost everyone. And the reason for this, if one wishes to know, I shall tell. I hate the mediocre, everything displeases me. The multitude does not satisfy me, and I am fascinated by only one thing, that which makes me feel free while being a slave, happy in misfortune, rich in misery, and alive in death. And because of it I do not envy the slaves in their freedom, the unhappy in their pleasure, the miserable in their abundance, and the dead in their life. For they in their own bodies possess the shackles that imprison them. In their own spirits they have the hell that curses them. In their souls the error that sickens them, and in their minds the lethargy that murders them, and there is no mercy that redeems them or generosity that uplifts them, nor brilliance that enhances them or science that quickens them. From this it follows that I do not give up on the hard journey when I am exhausted, and never out of indolence do I ignore the work that comes to me, nor out of despair do I flee from the enemy, or out of bedazzlement avert my gaze from the divine object. Nevertheless, I am generally labeled a sophist, or one who wishes to appear more subtle than truthful, or else ambitious, one who directs his efforts more toward inciting new and false paradigms than toward consolidating the ancient and true ones, or a trickster, who seeks recognition by obscuring his errors, or even a restless man who ignores good conduct to orchestrate perversities. May the deities, my Lord, distance from me all those who hate me baselessly. May my God be benevolent to me. May the kings of the world be favorable to me. May the stars view me as the seed is to the field and the field to the seed, so that in the world useful and glorious fruits of my labor may arise, awakening the soul and the heart of those who have not enlightened their intellects. For I certainly do not indulge in daydreams, and when I err, I believe it is not intentional. In speaking and writing, I do not do so for victory itself, but for the love of wisdom and enthusiasm for legitimate investigation do I exhaust myself, concern myself, and trouble myself. And this will be proven by the arguments of what I demonstrate, which are founded upon logical reasoning that comes from a correct analysis, formed by true images that, like heralds, are not imprisoned by the facts of nature, but exist for those who seek them, are evident to those who investigate them, clear to all who study them, and correct for all who understand them. Here, then, is my investigation concerning the infinite, the universe, and the countless worlds. Arguments of the first dialogue. We have then, in the first dialogue, the variability of the senses shows that they do not confer certainty, and that this is established only by comparisons, comparing one perceptible object with another and one sensation with another. And from this, it is concluded that truth is relative for different people. The infinity of the universe begins to be demonstrated, and the first argument is presented based on the fact that those who do not know where the world ends fancifully wish to build walls for it. From the second argument comes the fact that it is not fitting to state affirmatively that the world is finite, and that it is so in and of itself, because this is only proper to that which is boundless. Then the third argument arises from it being inappropriate and impossible to think that the world does not exist anywhere. For in any case, this would result in its non-existence. But all things, corporeal or incorporeal, presuppose, corporeally or incorporeally, a place. This argument comes from a demonstration that the Epicureans make. On the other hand, let us suppose that all existing space is limited. If in a sudden rush a person were to go to the very edge of its extreme margin, and from there hurl a dart, rigorously balanced to fly through space, do you prefer that it take wing toward its target and fly far away, or do you think there might be an obstacle to interrupt its course? Whether an external obstacle prevents it from reaching its target and settling, or whether it continues its course, the point toward which it is launched is not the end of the universe. The definition of place given by Aristotle does not apply to the first, greatest, and most common of places. Nor is it valid to consider the surface close and immediate to the contained, and other inconsistent considerations that treat place with a mathematical rather than a physical approach. I admit that between the surface of the container and the contained it is always necessary to interpose a space, which is fitting to be a place, and, if one wishes to consider only the surface of the space, it is necessary that one go seek a finite place in the infinite. One cannot forget the void when considering the finite world, for the void is that in which nothing exists. In the same way that, if this world were not found in space, this would be the void, where this world is not as understood to be the void. Outside the world, therefore, this space is no different from that one. Thus, the potency that this one has, that one has, and consequently it has act, because no potency is eternal without act, and therefore it eternally has the act united to it. But it itself is act, given that in the eternal, being and being able to be are not distinct. There is no sense that denies the infinite, for we cannot deny it, since we do not comprehend the infinite with our senses, but rather the senses are comprehended by the infinite, and, as reason confirms this, we are led to admit it. Furthermore, if we observe closely, it is the senses themselves that consider it infinite, because we always see something contained within something else, and we never perceive, either by external or internal senses, either a thing not contained within another or anything similar. Before our eyes, all things limit one another. The air serves as a boundary for the hills, the mountains for the air, the earth for the sea, and the latter, in turn, for all the lands. Beyond all this, there is nothing that limits the end, And it is so true that everywhere an immense space opens up without limitations for all things, which extend in all directions. From what is seen, therefore, the infinite must be reaffirmed, since nothing occurs that does not end in another thing, and there is no thing that ends in itself. One can only deny infinite space with words, as the stubborn do, when it has already been considered that the rest of the space in which there is no world, which we call the void and which is imagined as nothingness, cannot be understood without a capacity to contain that is no lesser than that which it already contains. In the same way that it is good that this world exists, it is likewise good that each of the infinite others exists. The goodness of this world is not communicable to another world that might exist, in the same way that my being is not communicable to the being of this one or that one. Reason and the senses do not permit that, just as an undivided, very simple, and concentrated infinite is admitted, a corporeal and explicit infinite cannot be admitted. The space of the world that seems immense is neither a part nor a whole in relation to the infinite, and it cannot be the subject of an infinite operation, in the face of which that which our insufficiency can encompass is a non-being. And to this objection comes the reply that we do not admit the infinite by reason of the dignity of space, but because of the dignity of natures. For the reason that underpins its existence justifies that of everything that can exist, whose potentiality of being in Elpino is not actualized by the act of being in Fracastoro. If the infinite active potency creates corporeal and dimensional being, this being must necessarily be infinite. For otherwise, the nature and dignity of both the one who can create and the one who can be created are depreciated. Of this universe, in the way it can be imagined by common sense, it cannot be said that it encompasses the perfection of all things, except in the same way I encompass the perfection of all the parts of my body, and each globe everything that is within it. That is, rich is he who lacks nothing. In any case, the infinite efficient cause would be deficient without the effect, and one cannot perceive that such an effect alone is the cause itself. Furthermore, if this is so, or if it is, nothing can be taken away from what must exist in that which is truly an effect. For theologians speak of an outward and transient action, in addition to the immanent one, since it is imperative that both be infinite. By affirming that the world is limitless, according to our point of view, the intellect is set at rest. Conversely, difficulties and inconveniences arise. What was said in the second and third arguments is also refuted. If the world has the shape of a sphere, it will have a figure and a limit, and the limit that lies beyond the figure and the boundary will also have a figure, so that its concave side rests against this convex one. For where nothingness begins, there is at least a concavity that does not differ from the convex surface of this world. Something is added to what was said in the second argument. It serves to clarify what was mentioned in the 10th. In the second part of the dialogue, what was demonstrated for the passive potency of the universe is demonstrated for the active potency of the efficient cause through various arguments. The first is concluded from the fact that divine potency must not remain idle, especially when placing the effect outside the substance, and from the fact that it is no less idle in producing a finite effect than in producing nothing at all. The second is drawn from practice, since, in the opposite case, the reason for divine goodness and greatness is suppressed, and from this no incongruity arises against any law of theology. The third can be converted into the 12th of the first part, showing the difference between the infinite whole and the wholly infinite. The fourth shows that omnipotence is censured not for lacking the will, but for lacking the power, by having made the world finite and by being the infinite agent of a finite entity. The fifth shows that if it did not make the world infinite, it is because it could not do so, and if it lacks the power for this, it is not vigorous enough to preserve it as infinite. And if it is finite for one reason, it is finite for all reasons, because in it every mode is a thing, and every thing and mode are one and the same. The sixth converts into the 10th of the first part, presenting the cause for which theologians defend the opposite, with a reasonable motive, and that of the friendship between them and the philosophers. The seventh shows the reason that makes the active potency differ from the various actions, and resolves the argument. Furthermore, it demonstrates the intensively and extensively infinite potency as a level that theologians have never reached. In the eighth, it is shown that the movement of the infinite worlds does not originate in an external mover, but in the soul itself, and for all this, there is an infinite mover. The ninth shows how infinite movement is verified in each of the worlds. To this is added that, when an object moves and is moved, it results that it can be seen at every point of the circle that revolves around its axis. When opportune, I shall explain this again. Arguments of the second dialogue. The second dialogue leads to the same conclusions. First, 4 reasons are presented. The first based on the fact that all the attributes of divinity are as one. The second, that man's imagination cannot be greater than divine action. The third, regarding the identity between the intellect and divine reason, which does not understand the infinite any less than the finite. And the fourth is that if corporeal attribution, that is, the quality which is sensible, has infinite active potency, what must occur with that which exists in all absolute active and passive potency? Secondly, it is shown that something corporeal cannot be limited by something incorporeal, but rather by the void or by the plenum. Either way, outside the world there is space, which, of course, is nothing more than matter and passive potency itself, into which the non-idle active potency must transform into act. Also demonstrated is the inconsistency of Aristotle's argument regarding the impossibility of the coexistence of dimensions. Thirdly, the difference between the world and the universe is taught, for when one mentions a finite and singular universe, a distinction is necessarily made between the two words. Fourthly, contrary reasons are presented for judging the universe to be finite. Elpino then refers to all the propositions of Aristotle, and Philitheo analyzes them. Some refer to the nature of simple bodies and others to the nature of composite bodies. The inconsistency of 6 arguments deduced from the definition of motions, which cannot be perpetual, and of other similar unfounded statements is demonstrated, as is verified in the analysis. These, of course, will demonstrate the reason of the species and the terminus of motion, and according to the occasion and the place, they denote a more real knowledge of heavy and light impulses. For through them it is shown how the infinite body is neither heavy nor light, and how the finite body may or may not receive these species. This makes the inconsistency of Aristotle's arguments more evident, who, speaking against those who consider the world infinite, presupposes the center and the circumference, believing that the earth has its center in the finite or in the infinite. In short, there is no argument, great or small, that has induced me to destroy the infinity of the world, both in my first book, on the heavens and the world asterisk, and in the third, on physical auscultation asterisk, about which no more is said than necessary. Arguments of the third dialogue. In the third dialogue, the vile fantasy of the shape, the spheres, and the diverse heavens is first denied, and there is the assertion that the heaven is one, that it is a general space encompassing the innumerable worlds, although we do not deny that the heavens are many, or rather, infinite, viewing this word in another sense. For just as this earth has its own heaven, which is the region in which it moves and courses, so it is for all the other innumerable earths. There is the declaration of how so many heavens were imagined, and in a figurative way, as if they were two external surfaces and an internal cavity. There are also other remedies and recipes that caused nausea and revulsion to those who prescribed and executed them, and to the poor who ingested them. Next, it is said that the general motion, as well as that of the so-called eccentrics and those referring to the firmament, are all fantastic, for they depend on a motion that the planet makes with its center along the ecliptic, and the other four types of motions it makes around the center of its own mass. From this, it is concluded that the peculiar motion of each star comes from the species that can be verified within it, like a mobile body that displaces itself through space. This makes it understood that all reasoning concerning the infinite mobile body and motion is vain and based on ignorance regarding the motion of the earth. Thirdly, it is affirmed that there is no star that does not move like this one and the others which, because they are neighboring, show the local differences of their movements, but that the suns, which are bodies in which fire is predominant, move in one manner, and the earths, in which water predominates, move in another. Finally, it is verified whence comes the light that diffuses from the heavenly bodies, of which some shine by themselves and others by the influence of different heavenly bodies. Fourth, how bodies very distant from the sun can, just like the closest ones, partake of its heat, thereby refuting the assertion of Epicurus, who believes that one sun is sufficient in the infinite universe. The real difference between stars that shine and those that do not shine is shown. Fifth, the assertion of Nicholas of Cusa concerning matter and the possibility of worlds being inhabited, as well as the cause of light, is analyzed. Sixth, even if there are bodies that are luminous in themselves and hot, the sun does not illuminate the sun, the earth does not illuminate the earth, and water does not illuminate itself. Rather, light always comes from the opposing celestial body, as is clearly seen across the resplendent sea when we are in prominent places, such as mountains, and when one is at sea or even in the countryside. We do not see them resplendent except when, at a short distance, the light of the sun or the moon is in opposition to them. Seventh, the inconsistency of quintessences is discussed, and it is said that all bodies endowed with sensibility are not different, and are not constituted by any first principles other than these, and also that they do not move in any other way, save in a straight line and in a circle. All of this will be treated with reasons easily grasped by common sense, while Fracastoro accommodates himself to Bertio's ingenuity, and it becomes clear that there is no occurrence here that is not presupposed there, just as there is nothing seen there from here which, if well considered, is not seen here from there. Consequently, the beautiful order and hierarchy of nature are like the dreams and jests of foolish old women. Eighth, although the difference between the elements is true, there is by no means this sensible and intelligible order of the elements, as is commonly supposed. According to Aristotle himself, the four elements are parts of this globe in equal proportion, if we do not wish to assert that water exceeds the others, for rightfully, we sometimes call the stars water, and sometimes fire, as do both the true natural philosophers and the prophets and poets, who do not tell fables nor speak in metaphors, leaving the supposed philosophers to tell fables and trifles. It is understood in this manner that the worlds are heterogeneous bodies, animals, great globes in which earth is no more important than the other elements, and where all particles move, changing place and disposition, in the same way as the blood and other humors, spirits and particles that flow and ebb, inflow and outflow from us and other animals. A comparison is made regarding this, verifying that the earth, through the impulse toward the center of its mass, is not heavier than another simple body contributing to this composition. Earth in itself is not heavy. It neither rises nor falls, and it is water that creates cohesion, density, thickness, and gravity. Ninth, the inconsistency of the famous order of the elements is discussed, from which arises the rationale for composite sensible bodies which, like many animals and worlds, are situated in the spacious field that is the air, the sky, or the void, in which all worlds are located, containing no fewer animals and inhabitants than this one contains, possessing no lesser efficiency or different nature. Tenth, seeing how the factious and ignorant dispute with perverse intent, the manner in which they usually resolve disputes becomes evident. Although some are so circumspect that they do not even become agitated, using a sneering smile and a modest malignity regarding what they wish to prove with reasons that not even they themselves would understand, and they intend, with these gentle artifices, to cover up their ignorance, which becomes evident in all its manifestations, and they also cast it upon their adversary, for they dispute not to find or seek the truth, but to achieve victory, appearing as wiser and extreme defenders of the opposing opinion. Thus, they should be avoided by anyone who lacks a good armor of patience. Arguments of the fourth dialogue. In the next dialogue first, what has been said at other times is repeated, that is, how the worlds are infinite, how each one moves, and how it is formed. Following this, just as in the second dialogue, the arguments regarding the infinite mass or the greatness of the universe were dismantled. And after the first, with many reasons, the great effect of the immense vigor and power within it was determined. As in the third dialogue, now the infinite multitude of worlds is affirmed, and Aristotle's various arguments against the word world are destroyed. Regarding natural and violent motion, and many arguments arising from it, Aristotle understands that one earth should move toward another. In overturning these questions, fundamental principles of great importance for discovering the true principles of natural philosophy are first set forth. Next, it is declared that even if the surface of one earth were contiguous to another, the parts of one would not move to the other. That is, the heterogeneous or different parts, not the atoms and simple bodies, which leads to a better verification of the nature of the heavy and the light. Third, for what reason large bodies were placed by nature at such a distance and are not closer to one another, so that one could pass from one to the other. Finally, whoever observes carefully will see the reason why there should be no worlds in the circumference of the ether, or near the void in which there is no potency, efficiency, and act, for thus they could not receive life and light. Fourth, how local distance may or may not change the nature of the body, and why, when a stone is placed equidistant from two earths, it will either remain motionless or move to one to the detriment of the other. Fifth, Aristotle errs in what he says regarding the impulse of gravity or lightness from one body to another even though distant, and whence comes the desire of things to preserve themselves in their present state, however ignoble, a desire which is the cause of flight and pursuit. Sixth, that rectilinear motion is not fitting, nor can it be natural for the earth or for other principal bodies, but rather for the parts of these bodies that move toward them from various and different locations in space, provided they are not too distant. Seventh, comets prove that it is untrue that a heavy body, although distant, receives an impulse or movement toward its container, an argument that proceeds not from true physical principles but from Aristotle's philosophical hypotheses, which forms and structures comets with parts that are vapors and exhalations of the earth. Eighth, by virtue of other arguments, it is shown how simple bodies, which are of the same type in other worlds, move in the same way, and how the difference in number incurs the diversity of places, since each part has its center and refers to the common middle of the whole, which should not be sought in the universe. Ninth, it is determined that bodies and their parts do not have a position under or over a specific place, given that this place is here or there. Tenth, how motion is infinite, and how the moving body tends to infinity in countless dispositions. Yet this does not mean there is gravity or lightness with infinite velocity. Furthermore, the motion of proximate parts cannot be infinite, for they conserve their own being, and also that the impulse of the parts toward their container can only happen within their own region. Arguments of the fifth dialogue. At the beginning of the fifth dialogue, a character endowed with good intelligence is presented, who, despite having been nourished in the opposing doctrine, by having the capacity to judge what he has seen and heard, can establish the difference between the two opinions, easily correcting and remediating himself. It is shown who those are that, not understanding Aristotle and being of little intelligence, praise him as a miracle of nature. Therefore, one should pity these individuals and refuse to dispute with them, since with them one merely wastes time. Here Albertino, a new interlocutor, brings forth 12 arguments in which the convictions contrary to the plurality and multitude of worlds are contained. The first is based on the idea that outside the world there is no place, nor time, nor vacuum, nor simple or compound body. The second, on the unity of the mover. The third, on the places of moving bodies. The fourth, on the distance from the horizons to the center. The fifth, on the contiguity of orbicular worlds. The sixth, on the triangular spaces created by their contact. The seventh, on the actual infinite, which does not exist, and on a determined number that is no more logical than another. From this reasoning one can, not only legitimately but with great advantage, deduce that the number must not be limited but infinite. The eighth, on the limit of natural things and the passive potency of things, which does not correspond to divine efficiency and active potency. In this, one must consider that it is highly unfitting that the first and highest should be like someone who possesses the ability to play the harp, but, due to a defect in the harp, does not play. That is, someone who has the capacity to act, yet does not do so, since what he can do cannot be done by him. This exposes a contradiction that cannot go unrecognized, except by those who know nothing. The ninth, on civil goodness, which lies in conversation. The 10th leads to the conclusion that, by the continuity of one world with another, the movement of one prevents the movement of the other. The 11th states that, if this world is complete and perfect, it is unnecessary for it to join with another or others. These are the doubts and arguments which, if resolved, encompass a great doctrine sufficient to uncover the intimate and profound errors of common philosophy, as well as the importance and timeliness of our own. This is the reason why we must not fear that anything might go astray, that anything might disperse, become useless, or scatter into the void, only to be dismembered and annihilated. This is the reason why mutations must alternate, and why there is no evil from which one cannot emerge, nor good which one cannot attain, while throughout infinite space, owing to continuous mutation, all substance remains one and the same. If we are attentive to this, there is no strange accident that can turn us away through pain or fear, nor fortune that can distract us through pleasure or hope, whereby the true path to real morality will be achieved. Thus we shall be magnanimous, despising that which only childish minds appreciate. This will transform us into beings greater than gods, and than that which the blind populace adores, for we shall be sincere contemplators of the history of nature, which is written within ourselves, we methodical executors of the divine laws sculpted in our hearts. We shall come to know that flying from the earth to the heavens, or from the heavens to the earth, is no different, just as descending from the limit of one to that of the other is no different. For we are bound to them no more than they are to us, and they are no more central to us than we are to them. Likewise, we do not tread upon a star, nor are we within the heavens, any more than they are. Thus, then, we are left without envy, free from the anxiety and worry of ambition, as if the good we have all around us were somehow distant. We are equally free from the great fear that they might fall upon us, just as we might expect to fall upon them, because the same infinite air that supports this globe supports theirs. Much like a free animal moves through its own space and occupies its own area, as do others of its species. With all this understood and considered, how much more shall we be permitted to reflect upon and comprehend? Thus, through science, we shall attain the good, for by any other means the search for it is futile. This philosophy awakens the senses, satisfies the spirit, ennobles the intellect, and leads man to the true happiness he can possess, which is relative to his essence. For it frees him from the eager pursuit of pleasures and the blind sensation of pain, leading him to enjoy his present existence and fear the future less. For the providence or fate that predisposes our individual being does not desire us to know one more than the other, and thus we experience doubt and perplexity upon our first encounter with the matter. However, if we analyze being profoundly, within the substance in which we are immutable, we will know that death does not exist, not only for us but for any substance. Ultimately, nothing diminishes in substance, but everything in infinite space alters its appearance. Since we are subject to a grand efficiency, we should not believe, judge, or hope for anything other than what is good and for the good, what is right and for the right. The opposite of this occurs only to those who perceive merely the present state, just as the beauty of a building does not reveal itself to one who observes only a single detail of it, such as a brick, a bit of mortar, or a small wall, but rather to one who looks at the whole and can compare its parts. Let us not fear that what is accumulated in this world might, through the vehemence of a wandering spirit or the wrath of a thunderbolt-wielding God, fall out from this tombstone or dome of the sky. Let us not fear that it might be shaken like dust and scattered beyond the starry veil, nor that nature could be destroyed in its matter, just as the air within a bubble dissipates when it bursts. For we know that in the world, things always occur one after another, without there being some profound force or the hand of a demiurge to reduce them to nothing. There are no limits, borders, margins, or walls that separate us or rob us of the abundance of things. For this reason, the earth and the sea are fertile, and the sparks of the sun are continuous, eternally feeding its voracious fire and the humors of the sea, because from the infinite is continually born a fresh abundance of matter. Thus, Epicurus and Democritus understood well, asserting that it perpetually renews and restores itself, unlike those who strive to preserve the constancy of the universe, demanding that the same number always follow the same number, and that the same parts of matter transform into the very same parts. Therefore, gentlemen astrologers, with the help of the physicists who mimic you, see to it that your circles display the imaginary 9 moving spheres in which you imprison your brains, making yourselves look like caged parrots, while from here I watch you hopping from side to side, flitting about and spinning in circles. We know that such a magnificent emperor would never possess so meager and miserable a throne, so poor a tribunal, nor a court so small and weak that it could be frightened by a phantom, destroyed by a chimera, diminished by a frustration, carried away by a crime, or reconstituted by a mere thought, such that a single sigh fills it and a single gulp empties it. Rather, it is an immense portrait, a laudable figure, an incredible image representing the infinity of the infinite, a majestic spectacle dedicated to the excellence of Him who can be neither perceived, grasped, nor contained. It is in this way that the excellence of God is glorified and made manifest in the grandeur of His empire. He rejoices not in one, but in countless suns, not in a single earth or just one world, but in a million, or indeed, in infinite worlds. Thus, it is no small property of the intellect that always desires and succeeds in uniting space to space, mass to mass, unity to unity, and number to number, through the science that frees us from the shackles of a majestic empire, releasing us from presumed misery and anguish. It provides us with the innumerable riches of space, of a highly worthy realm, of so many civilized worlds. It prevents the circle of the horizon, illusory when viewed from Earth and feigned by the fantasy of the spacious ether, from imprisoning our spirit, guarded by a Pluto and left at the mercy of a Jupiter. May we remain free from the fetters of an owner who is so wealthy yet mediocre, a miserly and sordid bestower, and free from the sustenance of a nature that is so fertile and magnanimous, yet subsequently rendered petty and miserable. There are various other fruits gathered from these trees, honorable and worthy, and there are other valuable and appetizing harvests that can be reaped from this scattered seed, which we shall not recount so as not to further expose the envy of our opponents. Rather, let us leave them to be comprehended by the judgment of those who can understand and judge, for they themselves will easily be able to build the entire edifice of our philosophy upon these foundations, bringing its parts to that much-desired perfection, if it so pleases the one who governs and moves us, and if the undertaking we have begun is not halted, so that what is set forth in the dialogues on cause, principle, and unity may blossom for some, grow for others, mature into a rare harvest for still others, enrich some, and satisfy them all as much as possible. Thus, having separated it from the weeds and the chaff, we can fill the granary of cultured minds with the best wheat that the soil of our cultivation can produce. However, despite my certainty that a recommendation is unnecessary, I shall not fail to make one out of obligation, to ensure the true appointment of someone whom you will keep in your circles not as a man you have need of, but as a person who has need of you, for so many and such apparent reasons, considering that, by having so many around you who serve you, you are no different from commoners, treasurers, or merchants, but by having someone worthy of being praised, defended, and aided, you are, as you have always shown yourselves to be, akin to generous princes, heroes, and gods, who created people like you to defend their friends. And now I permit myself to remind you of what I know you need no reminding of, that you can, after all, Be as beloved by the world and favored by God for being loved and respected by the princes of the earth, however great they may be, as for loving, defending, and preserving one of those men. There is nothing your superiors in fortune can do, many of whom you surpass in virtue, that will outlast your walls or tapestries, but you can do for others something that deserves to be recorded in the book of eternity, whether regarding what exists on earth or what we believe exists in heaven. Observing that what one receives from others is a testament to their virtue, but the much you do for others is a legitimate sign of your own virtue. Farewell. First dialogue. Interlocutors: Elpino, Philitheo, Fracastorio, and Bertio. Elpino. How can it be that the universe is infinite? Pietilo. How can it be that the universe is finite? Elpino. Do you think this infinity can be demonstrated? Pietilo. Do you think this finitude can be demonstrated? Elpino. To what extension are you referring? Pietilo. And you, sir, what limits do you consider? Fracastorio. To the subject, if you please. For a long time you have left us in suspense. Burcio. Philitheo, give us some argument, for I am going to have immense fun listening to this fanciful tale. Fracastorio. Modestius asterisk Bertio. What will you say if you are convinced by the truth? Burcio. Even if it is true, I do not want to believe it, for it is not possible for this infinite to be comprehended by my head nor digested by my stomach, although, truthfully, I would like it to be as Philitheo says, because if by chance I were to fall out of this world, I would always find other lands. Elpino. If we want our senses to be the judges, Philitheo, or if we grant them the advantage they are due, given that all knowledge comes from them, we might conclude that it is not easy to find a way to arrive at what you are saying, but rather the opposite. However, if you wish, you may begin to make me understand something. Pietilo. There is no sense that sees the infinite, nor any from which one could demand this conclusion, for the infinite cannot be an object of the senses. For this reason, whoever seeks to know it through this path is like someone who wants to see substance and essence with their eyes, and whoever denies it for not being sensible or visible would deny their own substance and being. Therefore, one must be careful when requesting the testimony of the senses, which we only admit regarding something sensible, and even then with some doubt, if they do not concur with reason in forming a judgment. It is up to the intellect to judge and account for what is distant in time and space, and in this regard, the fact that the senses lack the capacity to contradict it is highly illuminating and sufficient testimony. Furthermore, by making evident and confessing their weakness and inadequacy in the appearance of finitude caused by the limits of the horizon, their unreliability becomes obvious even through this. Since then, we know from experience that they deceive us regarding the surface of the planet on which we stand. We should distrust them much more regarding what they make us comprehend of the starry concavity. Elpino. Tell me, then, what is the utility of the senses? philotho. The senses serve to exercise our reason and partially to acquire knowledge, to reveal and to bear witness, but not to testify to everything, nor do they serve for judgment or condemnation, because, however good and perfect they may be, they are not immune to some disturbance. Consequently, truth derives in small part from this fragile principle that is the senses, but it does not reside within them. Lpino. But where is it then? Philotho. It is in the sensible object as in a mirror, in reason through argumentation and discourse, in the intellect as a principle or conclusion, and in the mind as a proper and living form. Lpino. Expound your arguments then. Philotho. I shall do so. If the world is finite and outside the world there is nothing, I ask, where is the world? Where is the universe? Aristotle would answer that it is in itself. The convexity of the first heaven is a universal place, and as the primary container, it is not within another container, because place is nothing more than the surface and extremity of a containing body. From this, it follows that whatever lacks a containing body lacks a place. Therefore, what does Aristotle mean by this? That place is in itself. And what do you wish to conclude regarding this thing existing outside the world? If one says that nothingness is there, then the heaven and the world are certainly nowhere. Pharisaistorio. Nowhere, therefore, will there be a world. Everything will be in nothingness. Philotho. The world would be a thing that is nowhere. If you say that outside the world there is an intelligent and divine being, God, who becomes the place for all things, you will be hard-pressed to explain how an incorporeal, intelligent, and dimensionless thing can give rise to extended things. If you say that he contains them as a form, just as the soul comprehends the body, you do not answer the question of being outside, nor the question of what lies beyond and outside the universe. And if you wish to justify yourself by saying that where there is nothingness and where there is no thing, there is also no place, neither beyond nor outside, that will not satisfy me. For these are words and excuses that cannot truly be conceived. Because it is absolutely impossible, with any judgment or imagination, to make me state with true intention that there is such a surface, such a boundary, such an extremity beyond which neither body nor vacuum exists, even if God were there. For it is not an attribute of God to fill the void, nor could he, being incorporeal, delimit the corporeal. For everything that ends is either an exterior form or a containing body. And in whatever way it is asserted, it would belittle the dignity of the divine and universal nature. Burchio. In reality, I think it would be necessary to say that if a person were to extend their hand outside that convexity, it would neither be in a place nor in no place, and consequently it would not exist. Philotho. To this one may add that there is no intelligence that does not perceive that this peripatetic information is an implicit paradox. Aristotle defined as place not a containing body, not a certain space, but a surface of a containing body, since the first, principal and maximal place is that to which such a definition is least suitable. I refer to the convex surface of the primum mobile asterisk, which is the surface of a body, and of such a body that only contains, but is not contained. Well, for this.
Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.